Chapter 6, 24 Hours in Nowhere, 10 o'clock p.m. Matthew dropped the jelly jar of water, and it shattered on the ground at his feet. My heart beat rapidly. I knew in my brain ghosts weren't real, but sometimes brains malfunction. I grabbed at the flashlight. Turn it off, I whispered. But both Matthew's and my hands were shaking. We fumbled it for a full 5 seconds or so before finally getting it off. Now it was totally dark. I could barely hear over Matthew's hyperventilating, and maybe my own. We heard voices again. Matthew grabbed onto me. Maybe I grabbed on him too. No one ever needs to know about that, though. They're getting closer, Matthew said. They were definitely getting closer. What do we do? Then we heard a voice shout, Gus! Matthew squeezed me. It knows your name. It's here for you. My brain was starting to think clearly again. Shut up! I heard her voice again. Gus! Rossi shouted. Where are you? Back here, I called. Don't tell it where we are, Matthew cried. It's Rossi. I shoved Matthew off of me. A small dim light traveled toward us, and Rossi and Jessie came into view. I walked to them. What are you guys doing here? Rossi held a lantern up in one hand, her helmet in the other. Jessie told me what you were up to. I frowned at him. Why? Why'd you do that, man? She should know you were planning on killing yourself for her. As you can see, we're totally fine. We? Jessie said. I turned and pointed in the dark. Matthew's covering back there somewhere. Probably changing his pants. He thought you guys were ghosts. Shut up, Gus, Matthew shouted. So did you. Rossi looked at me in the dim light. I'm grateful for what you're doing, Gus, but it's not worth it. I'm doing this no matter what. Gus, Rossi pleaded. I crossed my arms. I'm not leaving. There's no gold in here, Gus, Jessie said. I guess I'll find out. I turned to Rossi. Why did you bring your helmet? She rapped on it with her knuckles. Protection. She lifted it and put it over her head, her long ponytail flowing out the back. Then she swung her backpack around and pulled out an ice pick. If you're not leaving, then I'm helping. It's my bike, after all. She glanced around the mine for a moment and sighed. Dead Frenchman mine, huh? Leave it to some European dude to wreck a perfectly good mountain that didn't belong to him. She slammed her pick into the wall. When Matthew saw Rossi chipping away at the wall, the helmet on her head, he groaned. Why didn't I bring my helmet? I can't believe I have to stand here and watch you losers dig with tiny hammers and sword-like thingies. Pedwell, Jessie muttered as he turned the lantern up. I snorted. I may not have spoken Spanish fluently, but I knew what that word meant. And no, it doesn't mean you're an awesome human being, or thank you for blessing us with your presence. What did you say? Matthew asked. Jessie took a screwdriver out of Rossi's bag and shrugged. I said, hey, let's dig. Oh. Matthew eyed Jessie with suspicion. I don't think that's what you said. I don't care what you think. Matthew leaned against the wall and yawned, his arms crossed. This is the most pitiful bunch of digging tools I've ever seen. He really did look like our supervisor. Why don't you get off your lazy butt and help us, Jessie said. I don't have anything to dig with. I bet you could find a sharp rock, Jessie said. I mean, besides the one on top of your head. Matthew glanced at the ground. None around, and why would I want to help anyway? Because you're not such a bad guy, Rossi said through her helmet opening. I don't think as mean as you've led people to believe. Of course I am. I'm totally menacing, I finished for him. You're terrifying, horrible. You give us all nightmares. I felt a slap on the back of my head. Ow! I shouted and turned around. Matthew glared at me. Stop talking and keep digging. Jessie stopped graping at the wall with the screwdriver and glared at Matthew. Aren't you related to that dead French guy? Matthew scoffed at Jessie's comment. Where'd you hear that? William Dufour, Jessie said. That was the guy's name. Like yours? Doesn't mean we're related. Matthew shifted from foot to foot. I stopped digging and looked at him. What are the odds that two different families by the name of Dufour would end up in a town like nowhere? Matthew shrugged. I'm not a philosopher, so I have no idea. I wasn't sure Matthew knew what a philosopher was. Jessie continued glaring at Matthew. Why don't you just admit that you're related to that jerk? Matthew glared back at Jessie. What do you care? Jessie threw a screwdriver down and it bounced on the hard dirt ground. Because he killed my great-grandfather and stole his gold. Jessie stepped forward and shoved Matthew. Matthew pushed Jessie back. Get off me, man. Last I heard, your great-grandpa was the one who stole the gold and shot him. They continued bickering and pushing each other. I looked at Rossi. She had stopped chipping at the wall and was watching them through her helmet opening. She removed it and tilted her head to the side a little bit. What's this all about? They stopped arguing and looked at her. What? You don't know the story? Jessie asked her. Rossi shook her head. Thought everyone in Nowhere knew the history of Dead Frenchman Mine, Matthew said. She hasn't lived here very long, I said. She probably hasn't heard about it. Let me fill you in, Rossi, Jessie snarled, shooting evil looks at Matthew. That guy's, Jessie pointed dramatically at Matthew. Great-grandfather and my great-grandfather were partners. They mined a whole bag of gold out of this place. They were supposed to split it 50-50, but his great-grandfather was a lying, cheating, backstabbing, murdering piece of garbage who stole the gold and shot his partner. That's a lie, Matthew shouted. Your great-grandfather is the one who stole the gold and shot him. My dad told me the whole story. Jessie smirked. You mean before he ditched your sorry butt? That did it. Matthew lunged at Jessie, and then the two of them were rolling around in the dirt together. I stood there, no clue what to do, kind of wishing they'd stop, but also enjoying watching Jessie push Matthew's face into the dirt. The flashlight flew out of Matthew's hand and rolled toward me. Picked it up and pointed it at them to get a better view. Stop it, Rossi screamed. Are you two really going to fight in a mine that could cave in on you at any moment? They seemed to come to their senses and pushed off one another. They stood up, breathing heavily, keeping their eyes on each other in case the other tried to pull something. This has nothing to do with you now, Rossi said. It was a long time ago. Maybe you're not even related to those men. It has everything to do with me, Jessie snapped. I know that guy was my great-grandfather. Everyone in my family knows it. And maybe if some lowlife hadn't killed him and stolen everything he had, then my great-grandma wouldn't have been left high and dry with a baby to care for. Maybe we wouldn't still be here, poor as dogs. Not even enough money to get a new dirt bike. Living on scraps. Literally. Jessie picked his screwdriver back up and slammed it into the wall. Hope you're pleased with yourself, I said to Matthew, and turned back to the wall. What did I do? Matthew said. He started it. I continued chipping away at the wall with my hammer and chisel. Those guys could fight all night long if they wanted, but I was going to focus on the work at hand. I pounded on the chisel, which barely went in a millimeter with each hit, trying to find the spots in the wall that weren't filled with rock. I guess I had gotten over my fear of the mine caving in already, because I was hitting it as hard as I could. The mine echoed with the sounds of our pounding away, when suddenly my chisel went all the way into the wall. I stood back, not sure what to make of it. What? Rossi stopped and stared at my chisel. How'd you do that? With one hit? Stop showing off, Gus, Jessie said. I ignored him and grabbed the screwdriver out of his hand. Hey, he protested. I held the screwdriver up to the wall next to the chisel and pounded it with my hammer while the others watched. After a few whacks, it too went all the way into the wall. It's like there's nothing back there, I said. That's freaky, said Jessie. Maybe we should dig somewhere else. Maybe it's a hidden corridor, I said. Rossi reached up a slender finger and touched the screwdriver. Nothing, she whispered. Do you think... Think what? I asked. She looked at me. Do you think the mountain really is hollow? Jessie laughed behind me. Her brown eyes were barely visible in the lantern light. Why would they call it that? She said. I looked at the chisel embedded in the wall. I always thought it was because of all the mines. Rossi gripped the handle of the screwdriver and pulled it out in one quick motion. A whistling sound came from the small hole. She stuck the screwdriver back in and made twisting motions, causing the whistling to grow louder as the hole enlarged. Hand me your flashlight. I gave it to her. She held it up to the hole and peered through, air streaming out, blowing Rossi's loose strands of hair back from her face. Maybe you shouldn't do that, Rossi, I said. What if it's all filled with methane gas? She ignored me as she stared into the hole. What do you see? I whispered, suddenly terrified, like we were on the brink of opening some portal to who knows where, but not knowing nowhere it would be somewhere extremely not good. Rossi swallowed. Nothing. I heard a splitting sound, and my heart jumped in my chest. All four of us looked up at the rotten plank responsible for keeping the mountain from coming down on us. You're not doing your job, I wanted to scream at it. Instead, I managed to get the word run out, but apparently not loud enough, because the others still stood there, frozen. Run! I managed to shout this time. I turned and ran in the direction we had come in. Following the others, we barely made it 10 feet, and the mine started crumbling right over our heads.